Good evening, everyone. Welcome to our Lower Peninsula Stormwater Improvement Project virtual meeting. My name is John Zamina. I'm with Cummins Contracting Corp. I'm the project executive for the Lower Peninsula Stormwater Improvement Projects. Before we start the presentation, we want to share a few items regarding this workshop and the format. Due to the state of emergency declared by the governor, this meeting is being held virtually and not in person. We're using the GoWebinar meeting platform for the meeting. In the upper right-hand corner, to listen to the meeting, your computer or device speakers are selected by default. If you want to listen by phone, select telephone in the audio pane and dial in using the information provided. So if you prefer to listen by phone, select telephone in the audio pane and then dial in using the number shown with the access code. We will address questions and comments at the end of the presentation, but you can enter into the chat feature anytime. Just click on the questions in the control panel and type in your question. This presentation will also be available on the project website at www.lpstormwater.com. Further questions and comments can also be submitted by calling the project hotline at 813-642-3595 or email at lpstormwater.com. info@lpsstormwater.com. So tonight's meeting is about the McDill 48 Park. If you have any questions or concerns about any other park, you can utilize the city's customer service number as shown on the screen, and to contact the Parks and Recreation Department directly at the number shown on the screen, or you can email them. Again, this meeting is about the McDill 48 Park only. For the agenda, I'm going to do some project team introductions. Again, my name is John Zamina. I'm the project executive from Cummins Contracting Corp on the project. With me tonight, I have Tom Reese from EA Consulting, Carla Price from the Parks Department, and Jeff DeBosier from the City Stormwater Group. Just a little bit of background before we talk about the McDill 48. Back in 2016, the City of Tampa approved an assessment which established funding for some storm water control and flooding issues in the South County area. The Lower Peninsula Improvement Project is one of the first of several the city is planning. You can see the numbers on the screen. What you see in the blue shaded box is actually the Lower Peninsula project we're discussing tonight, McDill 48 being the green L shape shown there. This is 2 of the 8 projects. This project will include approximately 8,000 feet of box culvert. It'll have restorations and improvements to the potable water and wastewater utility systems. It will actually, by use of the McDill 48 pond, actually decrease nutrient inflow into Hillsborough Bay and improve water quality in Hillsborough Bay. We will, as far as the McDill 48 Park, we're going to be doing restoration of the environmental habitat. We're going to develop passive park amenities. We're going to provide an internal trail system with ties to the South Tampa Recreational Trail, and we're going to address elements of the Florida Communities Trust Agreement, which we will speak about in a minute. I'd now like to introduce you to Tom Reese, who's a nationally known biologist and habitat restoration expert with over 130 successful projects in the Central Florida area. Tom?
Thank you, John. I'd like to talk a little bit today about the McDill 48 Park itself. This was purchased in 1992 by the ELAP program, which is the Environmental Lands Acquisition and Protection Program of Hillsborough County. It was one of the first parcels ever purchased for the city of Tampa. It's called the McDill 48 because it's 48 acres, mostly of oaks and pines and some wetlands on site. In 2004, the city applied for a grant from the Florida Community Trust to purchase the site and repay the county so they can continue to buy additional lands. At that point, they became the owners of the site. About 6 years later, well, let's talk a little about what the city did with the park. So in 2000, they hired a consulting firm to do a management plan. This management plan is a 127-page long, very thorough plan, and it looked at all the habitats on sites and classified what the conditions of them. They found that the hardwood hammocks were in generally good shape, but the central wetland was really poor shape, as it had been drained since the 1920s, 30s, somewhere in that time frame. And so there was no water in that wetland, and it in their definition, been considered not a wetland anymore. Although it still has some wetland trees in it, it just is effectively drained. They also found that there were no federal species, listed species on site, but there were 21 species of non-native vegetation, unfortunately, of which, of the 48 acres, 10 to 15 acres were considered highly disturbed, with 2 to 3 acres considered monoculture of Brazilian pepper, a non-native tree. A big issue in Florida. We spend hundreds of thousands of dollars a year trying to remove that particular species. They had 3 major recommendations: bioreduction, which means get rid of the excess fuel on site because it had a lot of vegetation on site that needed to be controlled, rehydrate that hydric wetland, and also treat the exotics. Now remember, this is 20 years ago. This is what the report has. Right now, that report is being redone. It's going to be a 2020 version, and the conditions haven't gotten any better on their own out there. So I'd like to also now talk about the agreement, and that agreement had additional restrictions. So the FCT agreement, instead of, it also had what ELAP had, which was protect the natural areas, but it also went further and says one of the obligations for the city is to get a water management plan together with the Southwest Florida Water Management District, with the objectives to re-engineer that culvert system so it's not draining that wetland, and improve the water quality that enters Hillsborough Bay. Because currently the water that runs through this site, through the drainage system, goes straight to the bay, no treatment whatsoever, so it's polluting the waters in the bay. So that was one of the major the additional considerations that the city had to take on. In addition, they wanted to make sure the wildlife habitat, specifically gopher tortoises, was addressed, and pedestrian bike trails and et cetera for the public were going to be put on here. And they also needed to approve whatever was going to happen on here to make sure we're doing this in a sensitive manner. So I'd like to talk a little bit about the field data collection. To know what this site's all about, we went out there and spent days on site. The surprising thing is the gopher tortoises are still out there doing okay. They don't have really good habitat because it's so overgrown, but they're out there and they're thriving in the locations, which we'll talk about in a little bit. Also, there's a nice couple areas of saw palmetto in still good shape, and some very large oak trees. It's hard to see in this image to the right, but there is a person standing there with a white shirt on that shows you how tall this tree is. There is a number of these clusters of very large trees, and the rest of the site has normal, smaller trees on it, but these large oaks are significant on site. So that's the good. Now let's talk about the bad. There are things out here. There's a lot of trash that's been dumped, even though the city has done a very good job of removing it, and even the community has put some efforts to removing garbage. There is still garbage on the site that does need to be addressed. And then the ugly, and that is there, although there was this photo on the left is a southern wetland, and it actually is functioning well. That one's not drained, that wetland is working, but it is not covered with the right vegetation. So that needs to be improved upon. Also, you can see in the right image, which most of the trees are small oaks on the site. There is a lot of understory of fern, and although they look nice, these are not native ferns. And so there is another issue that needs to be taken on. There are big alterations on the site too. This big ditch on the left that comes in from the northwest, and a smaller ditch that comes from the west, and they both come together and they drain into that under drain system that goes to the east, ultimately all the way to the bay. And that drainage system, which has been what's drained that wetland in the middle of the site. We're going to talk about additional issues, and this is the Brazilian pepper we're talking about. On the left, somebody had cut a tunnel so you can move through it. On the right, you can't even get through that unless you have a machete. That's how thick it is. It's only gotten worse over the last 20 years, and you can see how thick the biomass is on site. In addition, you can see some of the native trees that are being covered with vines and the palmetto covered with vines. This site needs help. It really does. And the Brazilian pepper has really taken over. So it's time for this to happen. The city has been working closely with the Southwest Florida Water Management District to enter into agreement so they can address some of these things. So we were brought into this team to help come up with a plan to have the least environmental impact while still addressing the project objectives. So that means a lot of data collection, both remote sensing and field work. So the upper image is a 1938 image of the site. The red provides a boundary for the 48 acres. Inner center, that darker area, that is that wetland that was out there before it was drained in, about 60 or 70 years ago. The lower picture is what it looks like today. It looks all green, and green usually is good, but there's also, like we said, a lot of non-natives that need to be addressed. We went out there and looked at the site, spent days on this site to map all the habitat. And so I'd like to show you some of the results of this. These polygons in the upper left area, the purple ones, those are the non-native monospecific areas of Brazilian pepper. There's Brazilian pepper in other areas out here, but these are the big areas that need to be addressed. So knowing where that is, that helps us know where we can maybe site a pond without impacting good habitat. The lower one, the green polygons, these are tree clusters, and you can see by the size of these compared to the houses in the lower portion that they're like 3 or 4 lot sizes of clusters of big oak trees. So we mapped all the drip areas of these big oak clusters and included on the eastern side that hatched area of that's another big area. It wasn't easy to map, so we just did the whole rectangle. So now we start to get a good feel of what the site looks like. We went further, and the yellow polygons show you where the saw palmetto areas are. These are still in good shape, so we mapped them. And the wetlands, the center blue line is the old wetland that is not really functioning, but that's the former footprint. The southern blue lines are the wetlands in the corner, and that one is functioning fine. Also, there's tiny little dots on here, they're white, and those are the gopher tortoise areas. So we mapped all the gopher tortoises. And so when you have this sort of information, the site starts to design itself. And so I'll tell you, there was one other piece of information working with the team with Atkins. They had flown specially equipped drones at low altitude, and you can get 3-dimensional images of the site. The upper picture shows the red, and that's the tallest trees on site. And with that information, we could further delineate areas that we needed to protect. The southern image, or the bottom picture, is a LiDAR where it's a topographic layout of the site. The blue is the lowest pieces of the site, and the orange and yellow is the highest elevation. So if you're tasked with putting in a pond, you're not going to put it in the highest elevations. We're going to work with the grain. We're going to put it in the lower elevations. You can also see the 2 blue lines coming in from the north and the west. That's the drainage systems we showed you earlier, and then they go underground through a pipe out to the bay. So with this information, we came up with our very, very first draft layout. You will notice right away, this is not a rectangular stormwater pond like you usually see on the side of the road. This pond has a lot of curvilinear features. It's winding around all the trees as much as possible that we had mapped, and the good habitat as much as we could. And this footprint takes up about 30% of the property. So 70% of the property is still in its shape. We're going to do some improvements to that 70%, but 30% was ID'd for this pond. So we work closely with the team to say, well, there's other aspects that need to be addressed, i.e. being the trail system. And so the next slide will show you that we put in a first cut trail system. Now, this is without any public input. That's why these meetings we're having today are important. We do want the public input on the project, and specifically on this park amenities, which we'll talk about here in a little while. So working with the engineers, this is what we had. We did go one first step further, and I wanted to show you there's a lot going on in that image. So we shut everything off, and you can see now that the dark blue is the footprint of the pond. So in the dry part of the year, that's where the water is. In the wet part of the year, it's going to be a little bit bigger. That's where the plants are going to be that'll be cleaning up the water. But this blue area shows you what the extent is. And again, this saves about 70% of the site. But working closely with the engineers, they were able to go one step further. and cut off some more areas and made the pond now to the size of about 22% of the site. So almost 80% of the site in this final version is being preserved as it is. And we were very strategic of the area where we have to put the pond, that it's missing all the good habitat on site the best we can. Now there's a lot on this map. I'm going to spend a little bit of time on talking about it, and I'm going to also then have the Parks Department talk about it. But the things I wanted to point out are important on here is the way the design is. Working with the engineer from the northeast, that entrance of that ditch coming in is being now turned into a wetland and connecting into this pond. Also, you can see the red stars on here. Those are the gopher tortoise habitat. We have missed all those. We preserved 100% of the salt palmetto. All of the green dots now are outside the pond limit. The southern wetland is in good shape. We just need to do some improvements to the vegetation on there. And the central wetland now is going to be incorporated into part of the pond and be rehydrated to its former glory, hopefully. And so with that, I wanted to read to make sure that you understand that this is addressing all of FCT's requirements, which included what ELAP originally had, which is preserve the native habitat on here. Number two, it provides recreational facilities that what the city will talk about here in a moment. There's signage out here. There's going to be additional signage, interpretive signage. That's going to be part of this project. The biological inventory is being redone for 2020, so that's another item that's being addressed. The biggest thing is the stormwater improvement that goes to the bay. This pond will not only help flooding, but it will also improve water quality going to the bay. And that's something that was required by this grant from FCT. We're going to rehydrate the wetland, as I mentioned before. We're going to improve gopher tortoise habitat and remove non-native plants out here. I wanted to mention that this site is so overgrown right now that it has too much biofuel. If this site was hit with the lightning strike, it could be catastrophic, not only to the oak trees, but likely to the surrounding homes. There's no way to get in there right now, no trails for fire trucks to get in. So one of our objectives is to reduce the biomass so that we don't have this hazard for fire and put trails in so if there is a fire, there's a way to address it. All the trash will be removed, and lastly, this will provide a neighborhood amenity. With that, I'd like to turn it over to Carla Price with the City of Parks.
Good evening. I'm going to talk to you a little bit about the park amenities that are going to be a part of this project. Keep in mind, this is a concept. This is what we're shooting for. As the plans for the site develop, we'll be fine-tuning locations. So you may see a little different plan the next time you take a look at it. Keep in mind also that the improvements in the park are dictated by the agreements that we have in place with the Hillsborough County ELAP program and the state of Florida, Florida Communities Trust Agreement, and the management plan that was done in 2000. So we're following all of those agreements, all of those guidelines in the management plan with the improvements we're proposing for the park. I want you to look at the 4 access points we're proposing on the perimeter of the park. They're indicated by the black bicycle. We think it's important that we have that kind of access. At the end of Martindale would be the north entrance off of McDill at Averill on the east, on the south at Dauphin Avenue, and on the west at Elrod. So those are bicycle and pedestrian entrances. Also, the squiggly lines you see through the park are 3 different types of trails that we are proposing. The dark pink line is actually a paved bicycle trail. That ties in with the city's overall Greenways and Trails plan. So it'll be making connections beyond the park, to the south to Gadsden, to the north, up along McDill over to Bayshore on Averill, and up on Martindale to along Inner Bay Boulevard. The black, more solid line that you see is a hiking trail, but also it's kind of a maintenance access road for the park, for the pond. It'll be a softened surface like gravel or crushed shell. So that loops the perimeter of the pond. And you'll see a lighter brown dotted line, and that's going to be a nature narrower hiking trail with a soft natural surface. We'll be adding interpretive signage along that nature trail as well. We'll also be including bike racks and some benches in the site, and we're going to be very strategic about the location of those. We're aware of some of the problems that have gone on in the park in the past, and we're going to make sure that we are careful about types of benches and locations to make sure that we are not contributing further to that problem. Also, we're looking at ADA access, and it's important to us that we do provide that with any park that we build, and this one's not going to be excluded from that. So we're looking at a handicap parking space just outside of the park on Martindale in Skyview Park with a paved access into the park, which really leads us to a proposed picnic shelter or picnicking area within the park. You'll see on the north side near Martindale in Skyview Park, looks like a little black hut, and that is the location we're proposing for a future picnic shelter. We think that location is important. You do have some surveillance, you can see what's going on. We can also do the paved trail adjacent to it, so we have ADA access to that picnic shelter. So those are the things that we're currently looking at for improvements to the park. We certainly want your input. So if you have any ideas, any comments on what we're proposing, please send those to us. We're happy to take a look at those and incorporate them into the plan as we go forward. I'm going to turn it back over to John. He's going to tell you a little bit more about those comments and questioning.
Thank you, Carla and Tom. So now this is the questions and suggestions, and please bear with us here. I've never done one of these before where you're trying to take questions off a computer screen. I'm going to read the question. I'm going to give the name of the person as best I can. I apologize if I butcher your last name, but my last name is Amina, so I'm used to it. And then I will try to direct it to somebody that should be the best person to give you the answer. The first question is, what is the South Tampa Recreational Trail? That's from Dana Gordon. So Carla, I'm going to let you address that.
Thanks, John. So the city of Tampa has plans for greenways and trails throughout the city, and it's part of a master plan that was adopted in 2000. And we have one specifically for the South Tampa area, and that is looking at options to connect up residents with parks, with commercial areas. And it's a series of off-road trails, on-road bike lanes, and side paths along roadways. So the trail that cuts through the park is part of the long-range goal of connecting up residents to the park as well as other amenities in South Tampa.
Thank you. The next question, again, is from Dana Gordon. There's only one picnic area. Can we add one or two more? Carla, that's probably a question for you again.
We can look into that. Our budget, of course, is going to dictate that, at least in this first phase. Certainly, it's something we can look towards in the future. I think a lot of times we like to look and wait until we get the park built, get people start using it, and then we can also tell maybe where some of the best places are to locate further amenities, such as picnic shelters or picnic areas. So definitely we will keep that in mind as the plan progresses and look at if there's opportunities to incorporate it now or definitely in the future.
Okay, don't go far, Carla. Next question again from Dana Gordon is, will there be appropriate lighting and or security during the evening and at night? I would remind everyone this is a passive park. Right now there is no design showing any lighting out there. I'll let Carla address that further, but it is a passive park. Carla?
Correct. Our standard park hours are dawn to dusk. So the park will be closed at night. We may add a security light at maybe one of the entrances. And that's something we'll continue to look at, again, as the park concept develops.
The next question is from Carol Connor. It is, how will you prevent cars from parking on the very narrow neighborhood roads at the path access point since there is no parking at the park? This is a serious safety issue. current design does not have us building any, again, it's a passive park. It's not showing us building any parking lots. I'm not sure we've finalized all of the access points yet. That's part of the public involvement, but that might be an enforcement issue with the police department if people are parking there. Carl, I'm not sure that's the best question to ask to you or to address that or not. It's a little difficult one to answer.
I can make one comment is that on the north side of the park at the entrance we're proposing off of Martindale, we have Skyview Park, and there's ample parking along Martindale in Skyview Park. So there is an opportunity for people to park there and to access the park.
Okay, next question is again from Carol. How will the lots that back up to the park be protected from visitors to the park? Will privacy fences be provided? There's currently a fence around the property. I believe that fence will remain. And there's no plans right now to provide additional privacy fences to each resident that backs up to the park. Jeff, is that something you want to address, or is that a Carla question, do you think?
Yeah, at the current time, we don't have any plans, like you said, John, to change out any of the fencing. That's something people feel strongly about. Certainly provide that comment to us and we can look into that further.
So the next question is from Craig Miller, and my concern is the impact on the existing wildlife. What care will be taken during the years-long renovation, and how much will the trails affect the ability for wildlife to thrive and or avoid human contact? I think, and I don't want to get the numbers wrong here, but I think the pond is down to about 10 acres of the site. We do not plan to, other than a lot of hand clearing, which is removing the biofuel, and then taking the Brazilian peppers out. Well, a lot of that will be done by hand, so we'll have some impact on the wildlife, but we're not going to be in there with heavy equipment driving all over the entire site. There'll be plenty, almost 3/4 of the site will be available for them to move to. Some areas, the gopher tortoises will completely be screened out of that area. We won't really do anything in there other than just some handwork, which under Tom's jurisdiction and inspection to make sure we don't impact them. The trails are going to be, there's going to be at least one, we'll call it a hard paved asphalt trail. But the other trails are going to be some kind of stone or gravel or a mulch type trail that really won't have an impact on the wildlife. And in fact, a lot of the wildlife will use them as a raceway to move to different parts of the park. I hope that answers your question. We're going to take all the control we can to avoid impacting the wildlife, knowing that we're going to take, have some impact. But I think the park's big enough and there's enough space, and we'll be doing so much by hand that it won't have a big impact on them. The next question is from Byron Kelly. The majority of the conservation area was declared a flood zone by FEMA in 2019. What is the logic for adding more water from other areas to an area that FEMA identified as a flood zone? I'm not. Jeff, Erwin, are you on the line from Atkins or Daniel?
Yeah, I'll take a first shot at it, John, and I'll let Daniel follow up. It's likely that it's FEMA because of it's a staging for the hurricane, the flood zones from the bay. And once that happens, if you have a Cat 2 hurricane, you're at elevation 12. We're all underwater at that point. So I think that's where that's coming from. But we will not aggravate. This project will drain because of the large box culverts in and out. We'll drain this area and improve that. I'll defer to Daniel for specific details and clarification if necessary.
Yeah, so as Erwin said, we would be incorporating this into the Lower Peninsula watershed model and making sure that we have no adverse impacts by controlling the water within the park there, and then also providing water quality improvements there before it drains to Old Tampa or to Hillsborough Bay.
Okay, thank you, Daniel. Next question is from Casey Ringley. It says, hi, the plan looks great. What's the proposed timeline for this project? We are working towards 60% drawings for late February. There's some co-funding with Swift Mud, and there's some plan reviews that have to take place. If everything goes as we plan, we will start the outfall construction, which is over in Bayshore sometime in May or June. It's not likely the pond work would start until much later in the year. I'm gonna speculate October, November at this point. We have work to do with the FCT to get final approval. There's some permitting that needs to take place, and frankly, we need to finish the design. That's what the purpose of this meeting is, to get some feedback from you all to make sure we're moving in the direction that the community would like us to. Next question is from Tyler Johnston. I live on Averill. Will there be road construction needed for any of this plan? Thank you. Yes, we will actually, from where Averill crosses Bayshore, that's the outfall. There will be a box culvert that runs up Averill, crosses McDill, and acts as the outfall for the pond. So after the waters come into the pond off of Tharp, it will be treated, obviously, as going through the settlement zones of the pond, through the littoral shelves and the plantings, and the discharges out through the structure down Averill into the bay, much cleaner than when it came in. Any utilities that need to be adjusted on Averill will be, water lines will be replaced and upgraded if necessary, new sewer lines if necessary. There will be some storm drainage added at some of the intersections, and then the road will be reconstructed completely. The next question is from Byron Kelly. What kind of parking is being? None. There is no plans to build any parking. Its plan is, as Carlos said, to make use of the parking off of Skyview, I believe, Park. Next question is from Byron Kelly. Will fire breaks separating homes from the conservation area be maintained? Yes, I'm sure part of our design is going to have to include any fire breaks, and if they are required, they would be maintained and improved or added if needed. The next question is from Rob Sweezy. What's the impact and duration of the work on Averill? Impacts is an interesting word. We're going to be putting, I don't think we have finalized the exact size of the box yet. Maybe we have, but it's going to be coming up Averill. It's going to be taking up most of the road when we're installing it. It will be disruptive. We try to move through and restore about every 500 feet behind ourselves as we move up through the roadway, but it's going to be, that run's going to be 3 to 5 months of time from when we start to when we get actually to McDill, putting that in. Now, depending where you live on Averill, as we get closer to construction, we'll have one-on-one meetings. If you live on Averill, I would strongly ask you to email or and set some meetings up for us so we can talk to you. Look at our website. You'll see the plans on there as they become more developed. But we'll be very interested in meeting with anybody on Averill that wants to talk about the project so we can explain what's coming and then what to expect before we get there, not after. The next question is from Diane Kelly. I am very concerned with mosquitoes. We have a bad problem already, and adding water will only multiply the problem. What do you plan to do with the mosquitoes? I'm going to pass it to Tom, but I'm going to tell you that there's a small fish that lives in freshwater ponds called a mosquito eater. It's a minnow. And this pond is going to be designed with littoral shelves and plantings that are going to facilitate kind of a natural mosquito control. But Tom, if you want to talk briefly about mosquitoes.
Sure, John, you answered it correctly. This pond will have fish in it, and so that will help control the mosquito larvae. This is not going to be a stagnant pond, and so on the mosquito side, it shouldn't be an issue at all because there will be fish in there.
Thank you, Tom. The next question is from Byron Kelly, and Byron, I think we've answered this, but I'm just going to read the question. If we haven't answered it, please feel free to email us, and we'll try to give it a better answer. But your question is the frequently asked questions indicate only a small portion of the water will have year-round water and fish to mitigate mosquitoes. What actions are being taken to mitigate the mosquito population in the rest of the area? I believe Tom answered that as best we can, but if we didn't answer it, please email us or visit the website or give us a call. The next question is from Jody Blocker. Will there be a playground? There is no plans for a playground at this time. It's a passive park, and I do not think there's any plans for a playground now or in the future. Carla, please correct me if I'm wrong.
That is correct.
Next question is from Byram Kelly again. The online map shows the online map shows an entrance at the end of Varn Avenue. Vehicles cannot be parked at the end of West Varn Avenue. One car will prevent vehicles like city sanitation and emergency vehicles from turning around. Our driveway has already been damaged from vehicles trying to leave Varn. We're not developing any parking on Varn. We're not having any parking lots anywhere other than the existing ones at Skyview. This is more of an enforcement issue with the authorities than it is going to be a construction issue. I wish I could give you a better answer, but that's the best I can tell you on that. We're not encouraging or asking people to park there. We're not putting anything in place that would suggest they should park there. Next question is from Michaela Connie. Will access to the park be physically closed at dusk? If not, how will security perimeter residents be secured? Carl, I'll let you address that.
Sure. Security staff will be closing the gates in the evenings at dusk. So we will be securing the site when it's not open.
Next question is from Colleen Malcolm. Could walkways be marked with mileage markers? That's an interesting comment. We hadn't talked about that. I'm sure they could be. Something we can address, and we can talk about that as we progress with the design, putting markers for the mileage markers on the trails. Next question is from James Boyer. How deep will the pond be in wet and dry season? How deep you need to dig to hit the water line? And saying typically you can't dig more than 1 foot deep per 4 to 5 foot wide. The pond doesn't seem wide enough to support much deep water habitats. Daniel, I'm going to let you address the pond depth in the wet and dry season, if you don't mind.
The pond will be approximately 6 foot deep, and as you commented about the 4 to 5 foot wide, you have to remember the site is 48 acres, so although it may not appear as large on screen, this is, it's a 10-acre pond, so there is, room to make the pond wide enough within the footprint there.
Okay, next question is from Grady Gooselin. Good evening. With respect to the stormwater project, I'm in the process of constructing a residence on South Main Avenue between Inner Bay and West Bay Avenue. We would like to bring the issue of standing stormwater on South Main Avenue up during the storm. Will this project address those issues on South Main? If not, what do we need to do in order to bring awareness to the project such that it can be added to the list to be addressed? We're not prepared to discuss this area tonight. We are having a public meeting in March where we'll discuss the project as a whole. I don't want to bring the engineers on board to talk about South Main when they haven't really thought about it. But we will keep this question and we will address this on our website if we can review it. But we are having a public meeting in March to discuss the overall construction of the project. The next question is from Michaela Coney. Will there be available entrances if parking is not provided at any entrance? Can we only provide entrance to Skyview? And the answer is there will only be parking at Skyview. No other parking is being constructed as part of the project. Next question is from James Rogers. Have you noticed a stray cat problem in the area? I continue to have these nice stray cats come into my backyard. I placed 2 of the kittens and I cannot keep up with them. I have not noticed a stray cat problem, but I haven't been there much. I've walked it, but I haven't seen the cats. I don't know if there's anything we're going to be able to address as part of this project, but we'll keep an eye on it and see if we see any of them. I haven't seen a lot of cats out there. Next question is from Brenda Price. Will you be treating the water like you do at Gadsden for mosquitoes?
Carla, I have no idea how you're treating the water Gadsden, but I can tell you on this project, we plan to be using natural controls as much as possible. Carla, Gadsden, do you know? I don't know how they treat Gadsden. Are they spraying or do you know?
I do not, fortunately, but I think the natural approach is probably the best approach.
Question, what is the schedule for developing more detailed plans and how can we review them? Will there be additional public meetings? We are scheduling another public meeting in March that will have approximately 60% drawings. I understand that doesn't mean much to people, 60%, but that's drawings that are pretty well defined, and we'll be able to see the route, the size of the box, and have meaningful discussions with you about the actual project and those details. So that'll be the March meeting, and we will also, again, I'm going to remind you that the project website, www.lpstormwater.com, both this meeting and future plans are all going to be put on that website for your use when you need to see it. So you're not bound to just be sitting at this meeting. You can go back and look at things later if you choose to. Will this increase the need for higher flood insurance premiums for residents in the area? That's from Michaela Cooney. I don't believe so. I don't know that to be a fact, but we're not increasing any flood potential. In fact, if anything, we're decreasing standing water in the area. So I would probably say no, but I would suggest you might want to call your agent. And I don't know. I don't think
that's correct, John. We would not be increasing flood stages.
From John Mueller, the creation of the pond, hydration of wetland means more city stormwater will be directed to this site. This project has some, I think the long answer is no. Jeff, do you want to address that at all? Some of the other projects coming up in the area? The pond hydration of the wetland mean that more city stormwater will be directed to this site.
Yes, currently a lot of the area to the north of the pond that will be drained into here now drains via other conduits out to the bay. So we are bringing more water into this site. However, there's a large box culvert leaving the site that basically allows the water to pass through. So effectively, the whole project will be lowering flood levels throughout the route. It'll also give us a backbone, if you will, to reach out to other nearby areas in the future to try to resolve some of the flooding out adjacent to the route. So flood levels in general will come down. The fluctuation of the pond itself on this site will all be well contained within the site and won't be reaching any areas around it. There's actually a pretty good elevation relief across this site. I think Tom Reese had showed you a LiDAR image of the relative elevations across the site, and you can see in that image that it's kind of a bowl-shaped piece of property. So we're locating the pond in the low portion of the site, and the image on the bottom there, in the light blue areas, obviously is the lowest part of the site. And so, as I recall, we have a 5 or 6 foot at least elevation difference out to the perimeter. And maybe Daniel can address the fluctuation of the pond for a given storm event, but I believe we're keeping it to a minimum of maybe a foot or 2. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay, so the next question is from Brenda Price. There's some questions about the opening on Dolphin. Again, we're not putting any parking there. I'm sure that as we finish the park, there may be some enforcement issues that have to take place, but there's no parking going to be placed in that location. I'm encouraging people to park down there on the street. So if they're parking illegally, it's going to be something that the police department has to deal with on an enforcement standpoint. Next question. Thank you for holding this forum. We own a home on Martindale Avenue and have concerns regarding parking. There are homes on Martindale. We do not wish to have cars parked in front of our homes. We have communicated excessively prior to COVID regarding disruptive behaviors by the public who park across from our homes. How will you not use Martindale as a prime go-to for public parking? Would you create a parking lot to the far west of the baseball field, eliminating the public parking in front of our home? I'm going to be honest with you, I don't know exactly where Martindale is. We are not constructing any parking. The only parking that will be there is existing parking on Skyview. And I would, again, it appears to be an enforcement issue rather than constructing a parking lot there. So we don't have any, there's no plans to construct any parking lots, only to make use of the one on Skyview. Next, oh, that was from Claire Bennett too. I apologize. I didn't say what it was. The next question is from Emily Strickland. It says, what about South Himes? I don't know how to answer that, but if you want to go back to our website and call in or send an email, we can see if we can answer your question. Next question is from Marco Lamont. 3409 Ohio Avenue. He's happy about the new park and look forward to visiting. I'm sorry. He's happy about the new park look. Looking forward to visiting. My question is about my backyard. We get 2 to 3 days of thunderstorms and water runs off the street in front of my house and floods my backyard. At times it can be knee deep. It takes 2 to 3 days to reside. I called the city several times and insist with no luck. I know you may not be able to help me. If you could please somebody contact me. I have pictures. I'm not expecting you to read this all on the air. Okay. Well, Mark, I'll take this question and I'll take it offline and get it over to somebody in the stormwater group that can send out. I think they have teams to go out and look at areas to see what causes it, if there's anything that can be done, but we can pass that along to them. Next question from Joe Rodriguez. What is the plan to address the folks who reside in the park area today? I assume you mean the homeless. And when I walked the park several weeks ago, I did not see any signs of any current homeless people in the park. But I think Carl has already pointed out the park will be closed at night and they'll have security as necessary and needed for that. Next question. Will the water, and this is from Dana Gordon, will the water output at Averill Bayshore create a bacteria bloom like it does further up Bayshore? I'm going to give that to Tom. I will tell you, I do not believe so because the water is going to be treated coming through the pond, so the outfall is not going to have a high bacteria content, but I'll let Tom address that.
Yeah, you're correct, John. The water is going to be cleaned up as part of the design. It has littoral shelves and residence time. So by the time the water goes out into Averill, it'll be way cleaner than it does today. So I don't think there will be any issues at the outfall.
The next question is from Emily Strickland. Will the road be torn up for drainage upgrades? And yes, it will. But it will be repaired, restored, and improved. Some cases, new curb and gutter, new storm drainage pipes, new asphalt paving, new sewer lines, new water lines. It upgrades everything in the area. Having a hard time, Brenda, I apologize for having a hard time understanding with a mask. Okay. All right, so I'm going to get myself in trouble. Okay. Thank you, Gene. I got your note. It's hard to... Gene, we talked about how deep the pond was going to be. It was one of the questions. Diane Kelly has a question about the large feral cat colony that lives in the park, how we're going to handle that. We don't have... I don't know. We're not going on cat removal. It's not part of the process. I think as we upgrade the park, that the cats will move out of the area. My experience is feral cats are not good for the native animals in the park area. But we have fish. Next question from Brenda Price. We have fish at Gadsden, and we still have mosquitoes in all of our area. I can't speak much for Gadsden. I don't know. I think no matter what you do, you're going to have mosquitoes, even even fish in the water, you're going to have not much we can do with that. Another question from Brenda Price. I'm concerned about the homeless population security at night. Again, the site will be secured at dusk every night and open every morning, and if there gets to be a problem with the homeless population, then there'll be an enforcement issue. Next question is from Lori. Oh my Lord, I'm just going to say Lori. Says the plan looks great. We live on West Stark with the drainage entrance to the park. Is there an upcoming meeting that will deal with that construction? And the answer is yes, that will be in March. And we will do that. Next question is from James Boyer. You mentioned the pond covering 22% of the land. Is that during the wet or dry season? If that is during the dry season, how much coverage will be during the wet season? Daniel, I'm going to defer to you on that one.
Yeah, so as Jeff mentioned earlier, there's a lot of relief between where we're at and the homes. So there's about a 1 to 2 foot fluctuation during the larger storm events. So, but as we've stated, overall we'll be reducing the flood elevations throughout the entire corridor.
Okay, thank you, Dan. Next question is from Kenneth Evans. The conceptual plan indicates large tree clusters in green. Is the plan to clear the property of trees and vegetation except for those tree cluster areas, or is the plan to maintain the existing natural vegetation? I'll let Tom deal with that, but I can tell you the plan is to maintain the natural vegetation. We are going to be cleaning up some of the biofuel, which is the dead limbs and things on the ground, and removing exotics. But I'll let Tom deal with the rest of that question.
Okay, yeah, John, we are not have any intention to take any of the other trees out. Only the footprint of the pond, and even the trails are going to go around trees. So the intent is to save 80% of the trees on site.
Next question from Diane Kelly. Can we put a keep out or something similar type of sign on the city fence for residents that do not have a privacy fence? We need to address how we handle someone jumping over the fence to get out of the park through someone's yard. I'm sure we can put keep out signs up. I'm not quite sure how to address somebody jumping over the fence, but again, that becomes an enforcement issue, and I'm hoping it doesn't happen often, but I can't do much about that. Next question is from Diane Kelly. How will you control the alligator population that will come with this pond? Alligators are protected. There's I'm sure the Florida Wildlife and Fish Commission, but Carl, I hate to put that on you, but I don't really know. I don't know how you handle alligators in your other parks. I guess if they become nuisance, you deal with them, but otherwise they're just part of nature.
Well, we do, if there are large alligators, and probably any alligators in a pond, we usually have a trapper that comes in and relocates them. So if they're of any size, we do try to move them on.
Thank you, Carla. Next question is from Byron Kelly. We do not have a flooding problem right now. What guarantee do homeowners have that their insurance rates will not increase due to property being adjacent to a water feature? I don't know that any of us can control the insurance companies. I also don't know that I would describe this pond as a water feature. This is not going to, as Daniel pointed out earlier, this is not affecting FEMA rates or flood zones or anything. We're actually making use of the low areas of the site anyway to put the pond into.
John, I can address that. This is a flood relief project. We're lowering flood levels that are, in areas that are already experiencing, undue harm from, rising water in the streets. So, the fact that this is a flood relief project and lowering flood levels, you will see no increase in insurance rates. Your rates are based on the FEMA flood maps, and the FEMA flood maps are based on modeling such as what we've done for this project. And it's likely that those flood levels on those maps will not come down as a result of this project, but they certainly won't go up because there's a lot of other factors, especially along the coast here. You have storm surge that controls a lot of those flood levels in these areas here. So the bottom line is this will not make your insurance go up. If anything, at some point in the future, they may even come down.
Thanks, Jeff. Next question is from Claire Bennett. We understand that parking has not been considered in the design. However, that appears to be short-sighted. Most of the parking space at Skyview Park is used if games or practice are being conducted at any time. Have you estimated the use of the park and determining if parking at Skyway Park is sufficient? We have not done any traffic studies. Again, this is a passive park, so it's really meant for bikers and people in the neighborhood to use the park. It's not looking to import people from North County down to the park. But Carly, I'll let you talk about it if you can. I don't think there's anything you can do about that.
I'm not sure that our agreements with FCT and the county would allow us to do parking on the site. But I've heard several people ask about that. So that's something that we're going to take a closer look at is Skyview and the parking situation there. And we'll look at any other opportunities that we may have within the area that we could utilize. See what we can come up with.
Thank you. Next question from Byron Kelly. Are there valves in the box culvert to prevent flooding from the storm surges? No, there's no valves, but there is a control structure at the pond, and you get to. I'm not sure you can get a storm surge to go push that far up to flood, but there are no valves in the box culvert. Next question is from Emily Strickland. Will drainage upgrades go down Himes to the park? Drainage upgrades will come down Himes to Tharp and then come across Tharp into the pond. If that didn't answer your question, please reach out on our website or hotline or email us. Next question is Joe Rodriguez. Averill will become a parking lot. Will it be possible to make this street a no parking zone with fines, etc.? I think that's something that would have to be taken up with the City of Tampa Parking Division. We don't have that ability as part of the construction or the design of this project to make that change. Next question is from Jody Blocker. Since we'll be fishing in the pond, are people allowed to fish? Carla, I'll let you answer that question. I don't know the answer to that.
We don't normally allow people to fish in our parks, but I don't know if we'll have fish here. I assume we will have some, but yeah, we normally don't allow fishing in our parks.
Mr. Boyer, I'll read your question, but I don't understand your question. So if you would please send us an email, I'll be glad to try to answer it. Next question from John Mueller. Have any measurements been taken to the existing water flow through the McDill 48? If so, can you tell us how much water? Can you tell us what the future projections are of water flow? We realize that amount of water will fluctuate during the year, but can you give us ranges such as the stormwater project? Daniel, I'm going to let you take a shot at this.
Yeah, so as it relates to the specific flow coming in there, I don't have those numbers right now. I'd be glad to answer that via email. But we did incorporate the design into a hydraulic model to ensure that we're not having any adverse impacts for large storm events. So like I said, if you could reach out to John or the website, we will get that specific answer back to you.
Thank you, Daniel. All right, Mr. Boyer, I think I understand this question. If the pond is not dug to the water line, it will not have water year-round. It will be full of mosquitoes, and you cannot keep fishing the pond in a seasonal pond. This is not a seasonal pond. This pond will have water in it year-round. So it will never be a dry pond. It's not designed as that. It's not a seasonal pond. It will have water in it year-round. Next question is from John Mueller. As the city grows, will the volume of the stormwater increase at the site? The answer is no. The box culvert is going to be installed and pass through. There are some stormwater extensions that will come out of some of the intersections. There might be some small neighborhoods that are picked up in the future, but there's no plan to connect other drainage systems onto this project. I would probably defer some of this to our March meeting. So in the March meeting, we can show you a little bit more details of what neighborhoods have been impacted and are going to be helped for this project and kind of the limits of the project. So I would encourage you to be at the March meeting so we can talk about this in a little more detail. Next question from Brenda Price. Sounds like for stormwater, the park will be used for drainage from north of the ELAP. Is this going to cause issues with any drainage south of the ELAP? I am not sure I understand that question, Ms. Price. Daniel, Jeff, do you guys understand that question?
Yeah, so yes, there's drainage from the north of the ELAP site, but as we said previously, there will be no adverse impacts downstream. In fact, we're reducing the flood elevations throughout the corridor, and so there will be no increases to the downstream portion of the ELAP property.
Okay, thank you. Jeff, you have anything to add to that?
This is a flood relief project, and we are lowering flood levels, and we do some extensive modeling throughout the watershed that was shown previously, and elevations of proposed conditions are checked at every point, and there are no locations that have been identified that we have any increases in flood levels that are connected to this system.
Okay, thank you, Jeff. Brenda, you had a follow-up question. It said it sounds like this is a flood relief project that is running north of the ELAP. The majority of the improvements are north of the ELAP or the McDill 48, but we can address that in a little more detail in our March meeting. Gene Strohmeyer has a question. No fishing. Please clarify, because fishing is definitely encouraged and the purpose of the gas in Park Pond. Well, I have to defer to you on the fishing.
I'll have to look into that and get back to her.
Okay.
See if this will be an exception or not.
The next question is from Mr. Boyer. If the pond is only 6 foot deep, it will not be full year-round. It will not be able to support fish year-round. Is there any proposal to dig a smaller but deeper pond? The pond will have deeper holes than 6 foot, but the average depth is 6 foot, and it will hold water year-round based on groundwater information we have. But I'll let Tom confirm that.
Yeah, that's my understanding, is that it's designed that it'll intercept groundwater in the dry season, and then in the wet season it'll be augmented with rainwater.
Okay, next question is from Barbara Rasponi from Everett Avenue. We're excited for both the stormwater improvements and the walk of the park. It's a great one to end with. Great job. We totally support the project. Thank you. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is the last question that I have. I want to thank you all for attending. I would like to again remind you of the project website, www.lpsstormwater.com, the project hotline, 813-642-3595, and our email address, info@lpsstormwater.com. If anybody has anything else, then I will say good night, everybody. Have a great evening and stay safe.